right. Looks like folks are joining up. I want to say thanks again. It's been a little while since we had a PRI webinar, but I think we'll have a really good one today. It's a little bit more of a fun topic. We're going to be talking about craft beer, distilleries, and the impact that that COVID has had and all that. So today we have Jarrett Dieterle. Jarrett's with R Street Institute, and perfect timing. Jarrett actually has a book coming out later on alcohol regulations. So we'll talk about more of that later. Jarrett, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you much for having me. It's always fun to talk booze.
Absolutely. And also we have Cris Steller. So Cris is the founder of Dry Diggings Distillery, and he's also the founder of a local guild here. And we'll talk about his work with the guild and actually a law he got changed that had to do with tasting rooms, which is anything with changing alcohol regulation is a very big deal. So Cris, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
No problem. So we were going to have Daniel. I don't think he was able to join us. If he can join, we'll absolutely throw him in. So my usual tagline of PRI, we're a nonpartisan free market think tank. We're based in California and led by Sally C. Pipes, our president. So we've been doing this webinar series since COVID started, since this would have been a great event to have in a distillery or a brewery, but since we can't, here we are, and we get to hear the great insight from our panel. So Cris, I want to start with you. Back in March, late February, March, when this all started, you guys actually got local news coverage. You were one of the distilleries that made hand sanitizer. And I kind of want to just talk about what was that process like, and why did you decide to do that, and what were the logistics like to get that going?
Yeah, we, to be honest, it seems like 10 years ago, but in early March, late February, we heard about the cruise ship that was coming down, which they were kind of keeping out in the water and not letting it come into port because of this COVID-19. And at the time here in California, at least in Sacramento, it seemed like a long way away. But then I noticed what got us really thinking about it is I went to my local janitorial supply company, and I went in, and all the stuff that we normally use to clean our building in our distillery, a lot of it was out of stock. So I asked the owner, I said, "Hey, did somebody just make a run on this?" And he said, "Well, you heard what's going on." And I said, "Well, yeah, but this is the US. We make tons of everything." And he said, "Well, that's not what I'm hearing, is things like toilet paper and cleaners." And when he said hand sanitizer, I was like, that's interesting. So the next day when I came in, we do a lot of work for the wine industry. So we always have hundreds of gallons of high proof here, just in case somebody needs brandies or bases for their wines. And we took a 5-gallon bucket and thought, well, okay, what really goes into hand sanitizer? And we looked up all the different regs from the CDC, FDA, Cal Health, all those kind of things. And the rules were all over the map about what really it needed to be. So we just picked the one that was the simplest, but felt like the least that we wouldn't screw it up, being that's not what we do. Yeah. So we turned around, made this 5-gallon bucket, and I have a lot of friends that are in law enforcement, in medical, first responders types, and they were telling me, yeah, we can't get this stuff. That first 5-gallon bucket I thought was like a month's worth, and it was gone that night.
Okay.
And so that kind of kicked off we went from making 5 gallons on that first batch to where we were making, at the height, 7,000 gallons a day.
Wow.
And that lasted for a while. And then it slowly scaled down, and then all of a sudden it just shut off. So where we are today is basically we donated all of it in the beginning for the first, month. And then we switched to, okay, we need to stay in business, and we started charging for it. But our charge, our per gallon or our per ounce rate was about 5% of what it was running everywhere else.
Got it.
And so the people that stick with us now are companies that we helped in the beginning by charging normal rates versus inflated rates.
Got it. So I didn't realize though there was even a law enforcement angle too, or even just local officials that needed it as well, right?
Yeah, they didn't have budgets for all these PPE things that they had to come up with, and so we supplied as far away as Monterey, San Francisco, up to Susanville. We shipped some to Cleveland, some to Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of crazy. And it was just everybody was doing whatever they had to do to keep doing the jobs that they had to do. So essential services, and the hospitals, lots and lots of hospitals. So, and that's the thing is hospitals are for-profit enterprises for the most part. But even how do you budget for a pandemic?
Exactly. And it kind of seemed across the board. I don't know if it was imitation or folks heard about other distilleries or breweries doing it, but I know a lot of places in Northern California and across the state started making hand sanitizer too. And you could almost find it. A lot of places I followed had it. Was there a collective effort? Do you think folks just realized, hey, this is the one thing we can contribute in this time of need?
Yeah. So what I did because of still being involved with the guild here in California, that's a statewide group.
Yeah.
What we did, I mean, when I started making it, it wasn't a gimmick or something. It was like, let's just see if there's really a need, we'll know pretty quickly. Well, as soon as that started kicking off, other distilleries were calling me saying, hey, I heard you were doing this. What's the deal? What did you do? Whose formula did you use? How did you get approvals? And so not only on a statewide basis, but nationally, we were talking across the country about, well, if you've got alcohol and you have the ability to do the correct formulation, and that's part of the problem what's come out recently over the last few weeks is a lot of entities jumped into it that didn't know what they were doing. And so there's methanol and all kinds of problems coming in. But we were also the first to be inspected in California because we asked for it to prove that I knew that the methanol issue would become a bigger issue. And I was hearing different law enforcement or first responder agencies where they were putting some of this stuff on their skin and they were getting rashes or they were getting irritations. And then you started hearing about people drinking it and dying or going blind or hospitalized. And that's kind of the indication of somebody wasn't paying attention to who was doing this. Because you look around, there's companies selling hand sanitizer that have no business being involved in something like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point of, voluntarily having the regulation. So, it's safe, obviously. So that's not happening. Yeah.
And our kind of in was, well, if it's safe to drink, it's safe to put on your skin.
Yeah.
We're a food product manufacturer. So anything we do is going to be to protect that first of all.
Jarrett, let's pivot to you. I kind of want to get your thoughts on, like Cris said, felt like years ago, right when this started, what were kind of some of the first regulations you saw either fall by the wayside or get updated that were maybe surprising or, helping businesses, restaurants, breweries, distilleries stay afloat?
Well, one of the interesting things with hand sanitizer itself was it was already referenced by Cris was kind of figuring out what the FDA thought about it and a lot of the federal regulatory agencies and whether bittering agents need to be added into it or not and what could be used for it, which was I think an interesting time for a lot of craft spirits producers. But outside of that. The immediate and obvious thing is that on-premise sales essentially froze in place and stopped when the pandemic happened, as people well know. You can't go to restaurants anymore. And you might think about the restaurants, but, that also has a down the chain effects in the supply chain, and then includes alcohol producers that sell to those bars and then try to have their products bought by customers there, and other stuff too. People don't, I think, realize outside of the restaurants how many on-premise formats there are for alcohol sales. I mean, it's festivals, whether it's a spirits festival or a wine festival or sporting events. You can get beer at sporting events. So it really is all that, froze in place and dried up pretty much immediately. And also just the on-premise at the actual producers, their tasting rooms, which for a lot of smaller producers are kind of what they use to spread the word about their products. They're not necessarily buying Super Bowl ads, right? like the big macro producers. So not having those channels to market dried up and caused a lot of pain, understandably, and led to a lot of contraction. People's jobs were uncertain, or they were laid off, and growth projections fell a lot. And so the question became, what's the response, right? And then kind of the obvious thing was the response that the rest of the economy, by and large, had been doing, which was, well, ship it to people, right, or deliver it to them by local courier, or do some kind of a curbside form. But people pretty rapidly figured out that it wasn't as easy in alcohol space as it is everywhere else. We can get everything delivered to our door in about 2 days now, and sometimes 2 hours, and you can pretty much go do curbside at any business. But oftentimes alcohol is not treated that way. It's seen as different. We can get into some of the reasons why and what some of those restrictions look like. But that really led, I think, to this prioritization of allowing to-go alcohol and delivery alcohol to people, and kind of set off this wave of executive orders that governors were doing that affected a lot of different industries, of course, outside alcohol, but also by and large allowed for it. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, because I think that it's something I never really thought about before. Why is it that I, in a lot of places, can't get alcohol delivered to me in the same way that I can get a food product delivered to me, right, from Uber Eats or something. So that's just the kind of the immediate thing that started you started seeing all around the country, and it was a kind of a wave effect, as I said. So I think it made a lot of sense. And kind of the question now, which we can also talk about, is where does it go from here, right? So that's kind of this temporary fix while we're in the midst of the pandemic. But as things start to reopen, as we start looking to 2021, maybe we can all hope that we might have some kind of a vaccine or something that was just beyond the pandemic eventually. Where are we then? Is this stuff, does it continue? Is it made permanent? Does it go away? And what does that mean for the businesses that are using it to keep alive right now and as a channel for sales?
Jarrett, what do you think is the best? What state has done it best? Are there like a top three even?
Yeah, well,
real quick, we had Daniel. Daniel just joined us, so I just want to.
Hey everybody.
So Daniel's with Fountainhead Brewing, and I'll ask him really tough questions in like 2 minutes. So.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. But Jarrett, who? Is there like a top three, or did someone just nail it right away, or is it just kind of this osmosis of?
It depends on how you define, what metric you're using. I mean, New York was one of the early adopters. I think maybe the first state that did the to-go cocktails thing. So, they obviously get credit for that. But, Iowa was the first state that made it permanent and implemented it, the to-go cocktails component. But, other states like Georgia, for example, there's actually a bill they've been working on pre-COVID, but I think COVID kind of helped push over the finish line. They implemented a law that allows retailers delivery from a liquor store, for example. So it's another channel to market, and they passed a permanent reform on that. In Kentucky, also another bill that was a pre-COVID bill, but also got over the finish line during COVID. They passed a big interstate shipment law for spirits. So there's a lot of different states that have done different models, and I think that they each get some credit for that. Not everyone has done everything. Not everyone has done to-go cocktails permanent and delivery permanent, and shipping permanent. But it's been a kind of a laboratory of experiments of different states doing different things, and it's created, I think, more forward thinking in the space than there really has been for probably close to a century, really. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to pivot to Daniel. So Daniel, we're talking about, right when this hit, pivots that breweries, distilleries, spirit makers were making, or regulatory changes. Maybe take us through, like, right when the shelter in place started, or in March when all the orders came down. I mean, did you guys change anything drastically? Take us through those first couple of weeks.
Well, that first day was kind of, I don't know if it's surprising. We had all heard about it, but we were open. We had customers, and we find out it's a shelter in place. So, I think we took this kind of dramatic picture of the empty place with the chairs up, and that's kind of how it felt. It was just sad, and we didn't know what we were going to do.
Yeah.
That first couple of weeks, it was like nothing, and they said to go, which helps, but I mean, that's a fraction of our business. So that was definitely kind of panic mode for a minute, especially because the order came down so much before any kind of relief came, any kind of like the PPP and stuff like that. Yeah. So fortunately, we are located in a residential neighborhood, like right off of the main street, and so we just have a really loyal kind of regular clientele. So until the relief started coming out, we were able to just kind of survive off of that.
And do you think other breweries were as successful, or maybe other owners that you talk with or partner with? Do you know if they've had a similar experience? Was it harder? I guess it would depend on your business model too, of if you're in stores or if you just do tap room.
Right, and that's what's really interesting about the California, especially the Valley, is we're in an urban area, and there's a lot of us like that, where we have a lot of just kind of like people riding their bikes and scooters and stuff, and that was really made it easier. But there's a lot of breweries in our greater area that are on a farm or up in the foothills, and people reacted differently in different areas. But some of them are more of destination tap rooms, and I feel like they probably suffered the most because they don't have that neighborhood to rely on.
Sure. That's actually a great point. I didn't even realize, thinking of if folks in the area like Apple Hill or up in Chris's neck of the woods, I think, a lot of the day trips, they might've been hit hard too. Cris, I want to pivot to you on regulations and as Jarrett was talking about, could you take us through? So you got an alcohol law changed, which is exceedingly rare and uncommon. Could you just kind of take us through, give us an overview of what it was, and then just briefly talk about the process and how it happened?
Yeah, so since we formed the guild in 2012, we've actually passed 4 major pieces of legislation.
Okay.
The one you're probably referring to is what is called the California Craft Distillers Act.
Yes.
And that's where we got in 2015 the ability to have a new license, which is called a Type 74. And there's a bunch of privileges that are allowed in that. But the biggest thing is that you're allowed to have a tasting room. You're allowed to sell bottles direct to the public as a manufacturer. So that direct relationship without going through 3-tier is important when you're a small, especially if you're starting out from scratch.
Sure.
Back when we started, you basically had to go directly into distribution, and the distributors would look at you like, "We've never heard of you. What does your stuff taste like?
Yeah.
Why are you here?"
Yeah.
At least now you can start, and if you move quickly and reach out to the public and develop a following, you have a path to then eventually go 3-tier distribution. The other important item of the Type 74 is the ability to have a restaurant, because if you're only a manufacturer with a tasting room and no food, you can only pour quarter-ounce pours, and you're limited to 6 quarter-ounce pours per day, and then your sales are limited to 3 bottles per person per day.
Okay.
But if you open a restaurant attached on the same site, everything in the same place, what you're allowed to do is open a full bar. so you can do cocktails and all the like, so that now you're not only pouring direct pours, you're actually showing somebody what a product can do in a final element, a cocktail.
And what do you think, looking ahead, I mean, if you could pick one law to change or one regulation, what's maybe something down the road in this, I was going to say post-COVID landscape, but gosh, we're nowhere near a post-COVID landscape. We're still very much in it. I mean, what's something that maybe should change to help out folks more?
What we're hoping, we have a very close relationship, as the brewers and the winemakers do, with ABC here in the state.
Okay.
And we worked with the director on what's the number one thing that's going to get you through COVID. We can't just tell you to do whatever you want. So what's the one thing you want? And that was direct-to-consumer shipping. So we've always talked about it, and they gave it to us in a very brief paragraph that allows us to ship directly within the state of California, up to the max of 3 bottles per transaction is how we're interpreting it. Because even if there's 2 people in a household and they say, well, they each want 3 bottles and they're going to charge it to the same credit card, that doesn't feel right. So what we do is we ship 3 bottles per person per transaction per day.
Okay.
But our next thing that we're going to ask for is to convert that to permanent.
Okay. Interesting. Jarrett, maybe piggybacking on, intrastate shipping, you've written a lot about potentially shipping across state lines. Maybe could you talk about your, I think you had a recent op-ed and explain that.
Yeah. When it comes to alcohol shipments, states can implement themselves intra-state or inside the state shipments, fairly easily. And by easily, I just mean that they have the legal authority to do that, and it's not complicated. Whether they're actually able to have the political fortitude to do it is another question. But for example, during the pandemic, my current state of Virginia, they temporarily allowed distilleries to ship inside Virginia. Things get rapidly more complicated when you start going across state lines. So if you're shipping from Virginia to California, for example, or vice versa. And it's a weird legal landscape. It really is tied into a lot of constitutional issues, actually at the federal level. About a decade and a half ago, there was a big Supreme Court case that opened up interstate wine shipments. And so it challenged a law that said out-of-state wineries couldn't ship into Michigan in that case, but in-state wineries could. And it was held to be a constitutional violation to only allow the in-state ones to do it, not the out-of-state ones to do it. And everyone kind of predicted that would create this wave of everyone shipping alcohol across state lines. But subsequently, in the decade and a half since, that decision got really narrowed. And I won't go into all the legal, machinations of that. But essentially, we've gotten to a situation where wineries are able to ship directly to consumers in most states. It's like over 45 now. But distilleries and beer are much more limited. And so there's been some recent examples. I referenced it earlier. Kentucky passed a pretty good bill. It wasn't perfect, but it was a bill that allowed spirits, wine, and beer to all be shipped into the state. The trick, though, is that other states need what's called a reciprocal agreement to allow the same thing for it to be able to really go back and forth between the two. So the big question will be whether more states start doing that. And there kind of is this groundswell to have more states pass these reciprocity agreements that will actually allow spirits and beer to kind of get to that same level of interstate shipment. So it's a pretty complicated issue. I do think that it's one that people are starting to look at a little bit differently, and COVID will probably help with that and accelerate that because, we have such a national economy for things like, everyone's used to pretty much being able to find any product they want on a website like Amazon and getting it shipped to their door. It's harder in alcohol. I can't go online in Virginia and order beer from Daniel or spirits from Cris and get it delivered to Virginia, right? So I think that it's going to be kind of more people recognizing that and asking why and trying to push for their states to start passing those laws. And the more states that have it, it might start create more of a network and a community of states that are allowing it. And then that's how we get there. But that's why it's so slow.
I mean, it almost sounds like it's like a trade war in a way, where you're protecting your home state, but it's kind of this battle of, you don't want saturation in your market from, Northern California, Napa wineries coming into, Oregon or something like that. So
yeah, and I think that's a lot of the pushback, but really a lot of the people that I talk to in the actual industry, welcome and would want to be able to ship across state lines.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, there always is that impulse that can be at play in some of these things.
All right. Daniel, I want to talk a little bit more about, the brewery model. I think, you guys and a lot of breweries that have opened recently, it is the taproom model, right? I mean, that's kind of been the popular one, gosh, the past several years. I mean, do you think that's going to change a lot as folks looking to open breweries, or as breweries are looking to shift with COVID? Is the taproom model maybe going to go away? And if this to-go ordering is going to stay, is it just going to be, you're going to be sending stuff out of the warehouse 24/7?
I just on my gut instinct, I don't think the taproom model is going away. Before COVID, us specifically, it varies obviously, but for us, it was 90% of our business.
Okay.
So I think in the urban areas, that will continue, especially now with the outdoors. We can partner with food trucks. We've been fortunate enough to have one of our partners who has a catering license and does his own side business. So that has been fortunate for us.
Okay.
I think a lot more of the places that maybe they're opening up, that's going to have to be something they think about from the beginning. We're almost 5 years in, so we've been able to build that. But so as far as a change in the model, you're going to have to consider your outdoor seating and your food right away. But I think that in the inherent draw of tap rooms is the community aspect of it. And I think that I don't see that going away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say that, and I definitely hope it doesn't, but hopefully when all this passes. And I kind of wanted to get from you and Cris kind of origin story. Daniel, maybe you could start. How did you start Fountainhead? Where did it come from? And what's with the name? It's an interesting name. So,
I've been in retail my whole life, and my business partner, we met, just trying to get out of retail. I've been a home brewer, so we've been open for almost 5 years. I've been a home brewer for about probably 12 or 13. So,
okay.
It was just kind of like an idea. We wanted to go into business. He was thinking of like a restaurant or something, and I just kind of was like, well, I'll brew the beer. And as we sort of played with the idea, at the time, I believe there was maybe a dozen breweries in the Sacramento area.
Yeah.
And we kind of, visited a lot of them and saw the model. And, opening a restaurant is a Herculean task. So it was something that was much more reachable for us. We just, his father owns the location and was ready to retire. So the timing was really right. So we rented it from him, just kind of put the thing together. As far as the name, when I was in college, I was an English major. So I just was throwing out names of books. And Fountainhead just kind of sounded like, like a watering hole, kind of like drinking place. So it kind of fit. I think the whole Ayn Rand connection kind of rubs people certain ways, but it's really just the name. I just like the name. And like I said, we're in a really kind of tight-knit community. We've been there for almost 5 years now. And it's just been great. Yeah.
I was going to say, I've been to your brewery several times, and it's a cool spot. It's a former, is it a auto shop? So it doesn't look like that inside, but it's right. Definitely, the first time I went, I definitely kind of looked around and was like, am I
in a garage? Yeah.
But no, yeah, it's a very cool spot. You guys have done a great job with it. So
thank you.
Kudos. Cris, what about you? I mean, you obviously didn't necessarily come from the spirit world. What made you start Dry Diggings and the Guild and all
that? Crazy story. Moved, was working around the Capitol for a long time, had an opportunity to take a step back, and I moved to Mexico, and my wife stayed here, and we would commute back and forth to see each other. I have 3 kids that are all actually starting last week. All 3 of my kids now work at the distillery.
Okay.
So it was really being in Mexico for other reasons, but then in my spare time, having friends that I've known for years down there say, hey, do you want to go visit my cousin's ranch? And I'd go out there and there'd be agave fields. And then that led to, hey, do you want to come up? We're going to do an agave cook. And digging peña pits, or, you know, having fun doing stuff on the craft scale. It wasn't like I was hanging out with the people at Cuerva.
Yeah.
It was very small out in the rural parts. And then an opportunity came to go over and see what things were like in Guadalajara, and saw some mezcal operations and some bigger tequila operations. And then my time in Mexico came to an end. It was about 10 years. And I came home, and the landscape up here had really changed. And I had 2 friends that were looking for something to do, kind of the same story that Danny just told, where you look at who you know, and next thing you know, they're like, hey, you know some stuff about this. Do you want to start a distillery? And I, at the time, thought that's insane. California rules and regulations and Cal OSHA.
Yeah.
Well, it wound up being good timing. And early into it, I met Lance Winters, that arguably started the first craft distillery in the United States, St. George Spirits.
Okay.
And he was great, gave me some good direction. And that's what's kind of started the guild, as I started noticing that other people were at the same stage we were. We're talking between 2008 and 2012. So we actually licensed and opened in 2012, and have gone on from there. So we keep changing direction. We went the distribution route with 3-tier and decided that wasn't for us.
Sure.
But that's also what led to the Type 74 license. So.
No, that's a cool story. I was hoping that story was going to lead into you made Dwayne the Rock Johnson's tequila, but
we've been asked by numerous big name people, would we be interested? Because we do what's called private label work here.
okay.
And like here in Sacramento, we make Cordy Brothers. Daryl Cordy is a good friend, long-term friend, and we make anything that's a spirit with his name on it. We probably make it.
Oh, that's great.
And we do some other brands that are on their way to becoming national brands. But the big public name stuff is less appealing.
No, I'm sure it's a whole nother market.
Yeah.
But no, that's a very cool story with the I remember mezcal a decade ago was getting really popular as an alternative as well. So that's interesting.
It's slowly growing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bigger thing in years to come as Blue Weber agave becomes more scarce. You're going to have to look for alternatives, and mezcal has really outgrown its worm in the bottom of the bottle reputation.
Yeah.
And it's really becoming a something that's going to be big.
Great. All right. Well, I wanted to get to the fun questions, kind of a little lightning round. I wanted to go straight to what is, I'll start with Cris and Daniel. Cris, what's your favorite spirit that you guys make?
That's like picking your favorite child.
You got to do it.
If I was going to, because I'm a Jeep guy and off-road guy, if I have to have one, it's Rubicon.
Great.
It's a rye whiskey, 100% rye, double-barreled. It's done in a California style, very rich but smooth. This is the one, if I have to take a drink and this is the only bottle we've got to win.
That's good. And that's obviously for Rubicon Trail, I take it, up in Tahoe.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Daniel, what about you?
I would say that something that I've brewed since day one, well, even since brewing in my garage at home, is an Imperial Red. We call Panama Red now, which we don't distribute it because there's like a million Panama Reds out there. But we do, small orders in liquor stores and stuff are like a keg at a restaurant. Only like on a small time basis, because it's one of those ones where if we don't have it in the tap room, it's a problem. And it's just super malty, big beer. Like we serve it in like a 12-ounce little goblet. It's one of those really rich, kind of just sit back and almost want to light up a cigar kind of beers. And it's not every day, but it's definitely a treat. And it ages really well. We'll set a keg aside sometimes and let it sit for months, and it gets better and better. So
I was going to say, is it a problem for customers or a problem for you that it's not in there?
Well, for customers. Yeah, for customers. I mean, problem for me as a business owner, but it's definitely one of the questions. When's Panama Red coming back? So
no, those both sound great. Well, all around robin this, but we can start with Jarrett. Jarrett, what's your favorite beer or spirit out in your area?
It's really tough to choose. I'm in the Richmond, Virginia area, and our beer scene is really exploded out here. And there's really some great distilleries now in Virginia. So it would be hard for me to choose. But a couple of my favorites, Triple Crossing is a great brewery here, and The Answer is a awesome little brewery that's doing some fun stuff. And Hardywood is kind of one of the OG Richmond breweries. So all those I appreciate, and Reservoir is a fun distillery in town here that's making some really good whiskey. So those are probably my go-tos during the pandemic. But yeah, it's hard for me to choose just one from each place because I like drinking everything. So
not a bad problem. Cris, what's your favorite? You can do a spirit or a beer that someone else makes.
Well,
so this is like choosing your favorite cousin.
Yeah. Well, outside of tequila, because all the brands I would name, nobody's ever heard of.
Okay.
But what really got us going down the path that we chose, I have to give credit, the big guys at Buffalo Trace with Blanton's.
Oh, yeah.
To me, it was the first real attempt to do large but single barrel batch.
Sure.
And it showed what could be done. And so we kind of modeled ourselves after, well, if they can do it, we could possibly do it and do something unique. It really showed that you could do something outside of the normal.
That's great. Yeah, Buffalo Trace is I would say it's a classic that you can find most spots that you go to.
Yeah.
So.
Well, even our tours, Freddie Johnson finally has gotten over the last couple of years some of the notoriety that he deserves. But our tours were modeled after the information that Buffalo Trace was willing to put into the public realm.
Okay.
And so it's a big influence. I mean, it's a big, huge company, but they really put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah. No. Daniel, what about you? What's can do spirit or beer that someone else makes?
For me, we get a lot of, everything is sort of flooded with IPAs and big beers. So I love finding a really light, crisp, like well-made lager. And so Urban Roots here in Midtown has a Czech Pilsner that's just perfect. And then Flatland out in Elk Grove does the one called it Pilsner-ish, because it's not actually a traditional Pilsner. But again, I believe that one's an award winner, but it's just one of those ones where it's such a classic style, but it's for a reason. You can't go wrong with it. And it's just, I could drink those every day.
Yeah. And I was going to say to Jarrett's comment, I think it's funny hearing Daniel say 5 years ago there was only a dozen breweries in Sacramento, because my gosh, I have the beer passport to sell, and they have to keep adding pages because it's 60, 70 plus, probably more than that now, which is great, which, you love to see that. I'll quickly go because I had two, and I actually have the cans. So I have Fort Rock, which is Damn Good Pills, and I have Out of Bounds Brewing in Folsom. And Fort Rock's is in Rancho Cordova, close to me. So those are local, and those are light beers, but they have some good beers that are great and really cool tap rooms. So another question for you all, round robin. What's one unexpected project or hobby you picked up during COVID or started? Daniel, we can start with you.
I actually work in the pharmacy industry, so my life is not that different from COVID. So I was one of those weird situations where it didn't change, so I still work all the time, and I work and brew. That's all I do.
That doesn't sound too bad.
Not a great answer, but that's the truth.
If you said home brewing, I would have said you have to have something else. Chris, what about you?
It grew out of our hand sanitizer. I would call it parking lot camping. Sleeping in my car to make sure somebody doesn't come by and try to do something that they would deeply, deeply regret with some of the chemicals that we had to store in our parking lot.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah, we were here 24/7 for several weeks and 7 days a week still, even now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's no hobbies, there's no nothing. It's work and sleeping, and sometimes the two take place in the same place.
Tailgating, you could call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jarrett, what about you?
Yeah, mine's a little bit of a work answer, I guess, but I found myself doing a lot of mixology. Part of it is because I was kind of finishing up my book, and it's a cocktail book at heart, and has a lot of recipes in it. So most of which I had already tested a lot, but some I wanted to retest and test again. And so I found myself mixing a lot of drinks. There's worse problems to have, I realized, as far as work stuff going on. But I had to make sure that I wasn't telling anyone to make something that tasted terrible. So yeah, that's what I've been doing a lot on. Now that the book's off to the publisher, I don't have that excuse anymore for making cocktails. But that the first couple months of the pandemic was tied up with a lot of that.
You got to do your research, right?
There you go. Yeah, field research.
Taste your research.
Yep.
All right. Well, guys, that was a great discussion. That was the main questions I had. I wanted to give you guys the last word, so we can go around and then close it down from there. Cris, why don't you go first?
I guess it would be just the hope for the future. The hospitality industry is being decimated. We're constantly hearing of restaurants closing, bars closing, breweries, distilleries, and now even maybe some wineries that are running into financial problems, but also staffing problems is going to be the next thing. If things do come back, all the people that used to work for us have gone somewhere else, so to speak, waiters and waitresses and kitchen staff. So I hope that everybody supports as best they can your local operations, not to take anything away from the big chains, but they have deeper pockets and we don't. So hopefully that we all find a way through this. And the other thing then would be more reaching out between the different types. So we do a lot of work for the wine industry. We have friends in the beer industry, but maybe doing events that are regional that combine the three so that we all get to know each other a little better because as we all know, good things come out of collaborations.
That's a great idea. Jarrett, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, no, this has been great. I think that it's an interesting time for the alcohol industry and the alcohol legal landscape. It's an area of the law that has changed, but not really as much as it probably should have, really, since the end of Prohibition. A lot of the laws that we have are really antiquated and hangovers from that. And so I think that this is kind of a unique opportunity to press the reset on some of those, particularly in the shipping retailing space, as far as what channels you can get your product to market and how. And so I think that's it's I guess a moment for some cautious optimism in that regard, and I think it's needed because it's a really tough time as Cris and Daniel have hit upon right now for spirits producers. So
Great point. Daniel, you can close us out.
I'll kind of just add, those are both great points, and so I would say, especially for our model, we're tap room based. If people are out there and how you choose to spend your money. Again, it isn't anything against the bad guys, like Cris said, the big guys, but we literally are family-run businesses that depend on our neighbors. And so I would suggest that everyone remember that, and not just, you know, our industry, but just your community in general.
Yeah.
And then as for other business owners, I feel like things would be a lot, you know, we would be able to deal with a lot of these kind of things if a lot more people were involved in, you know, your local district representatives. We don't have to always be, you know, talking to, you know, our senators and everything. You know, there's a lot of stuff that happens locally that I think we can all benefit with each other through every industry. So that would be my final point.
No, that's a great point. All right. Well, hey, thank you guys. I thought it was a great discussion, and I know you all are busy, everything going on. So thanks for taking the almost hour out of your day, and thanks to everybody watching. So we'll, I know we'll be back. PRI will be back soon. We're going to have a webinar on a water book that is about to come out. So that if you're into water policy, which maybe nobody is, which I actually love, we'll that'll be our next one. So Jarrett, Cris, Daniel, thank you guys. It was great having you on and hearing from you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
All right,
it.
take care. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.